Hello, welcome to Saints Live. I'm Kenzie Benali.
And I'm Steve Forbes.
Today, the Saints travel to the Etihad to take on current league leaders Manchester City. The Blues will of course be looking to bounce back from the Derby Day defeat, while Southampton will be looking to build on the win against Sheffield United. Kick-off is scheduled for 6 p.m, and with us to build up to that game is former Saints captain Dean Hammond and Premier League reporter Paul Belverson. Great to have you guys with us as always.
Definitely. Now we've got some early team news and we know that Danny Ings is going to be out until April. There's no other fresh injury concerns, although Theo Walcott, Oriol Romeu, Will Smallbone, Michael Obafemi, they're all long-term absentees. So to start with, gentlemen, and Dean will come to you first, what do you think, or how do you think Ralph is going to line up today, given the kind of extensive list for the treatment table?
Yeah, I think potentially he'll look to make changes if possible. I think there's some areas where that's easier than others. I think he'll try to freshen the team up a little bit, just due to the fact of the importance of the games after this fixture. Not to overlook this fixture, but I think the next 5 games after the Man City game is really, really important. But also, it's the balancing act of continue that really positive vibe from the victory at the weekend, and not going to Man City with a really weakened team and conceding a really heavy defeat, which then probably would affect the players again. So it is finding that balance. I think the wide players can definitely be changed. I think that could be freshened up, and Stuart Armstrong has been fantastic, but I think probably deserves a rest. Shay Adams, I think, will come in for Danny Ings. I think that's an easy decision because of his performance at the weekend, and obviously due to Danny's injury. And maybe changing the 2 centre halves. You know, we've not really mentioned Jack Stephens for a long period of time, and he's been sitting there waiting there patiently. Salisu has come in and done very well. Could the centre halves have a little bit of a rest? I think he'll go with Fraser Forster because he's come back in and performed very well, and he'll want some consistency and to continue playing and continue growing the confidence that he's bringing to the team and to himself. The fullback areas, I think, will stay the same because there isn't any other options in personally. So yeah, I think the manager will want to freshen it up, but he'll be aware that he still needs to put a strong team out. So I'm looking forward to seeing what team he picks for the game tonight.
Yeah, Paul, Dee makes a good point there. Does Ralph stick with a winning formula, or does he freshen it up for what some may call a more winnable game next time out?
I don't think he'll be looking ahead to the next game. I think he would want to freshen it up where he can, but his hands are tied by the squad, really, aren't they? I'd be surprised if we didn't see 4-2-2-2 yet again. It's so very rare that he deviates from that formation after it worked so well. From when he arrived at the club, he said that was the way he was going to play, and once he settled on it after sort of about 9 to 12 months, something like that, then it's been his formation ever since. And for that, then I think we surely see the same back 5, because that's the best back 5. They've got such a wonderful understanding and record together. I think, again, in central midfield, there just aren't really any other options. Thankfully, Ibrahima Diallo came back to partner Prowsey at the weekend. Like Dean said, out wide, that's where he's got options. He's got 4 excellent players he can pick. So I'd have thought Moussa Djenepo has a very good chance of coming in. Nathan Redmond perhaps up front alongside Shay Adams today, particularly after Ralph gave us a big hint that Nathan Tella probably won't be involved because they need to be so careful and wary of his workload, having just broken in and being so young. I think the only other perhaps option, Dan Lundulu, he's barely played really recently. I think over the past 8 or 9 games, he's only made 23 minutes of appearances in the Premier League, something like that. So it would be an enormous call to bring him in. But Ralph's not averse to springing the odd surprise, is he? So, yeah, we'll see.
Well, Belvers, you mentioned Nathan Tella there. He made a huge impression against Sheffield United, didn't he? Dean, what stood out for you from his performance?
Well, to start with, it was a really excellent performance. He made a huge impact on the game. I really liked his movement and his willingness to run in behind and stretch the defence, and his aggressive nature as well. If you can see from here that he's running at real pace, real intensity, that he's trying to get in behind the defence, and that really helped the team. His movement here in between two defenders, he knows the spaces in behind. He's confident in his pace. He shows really, really good pace to out-muscle and outstretch the defender and win a penalty. And, he looked really good. I like the fact that he wasn't intimidated by Sheffield United's physical approach early on in the game. It didn't affect his performance. Again, using his pace down the wide here, really, really good. But also, he looked brave. He looked confident on the ball. There was a period in the second half where he had an opportunity goal. I think we're going to see here. Lets the body roll across him. Could have laid the ball off, but took the opportunity to take a strike at goal with his left foot. So, showing that confidence. And he grew into the game. So, he's been a brilliant addition. He looks strong. He looks sharp. And most of his appearances that he's played in the first team now, he's had an impact. The assist he got for Stuart Armstrong against Wolves, where he was very, very composed and he took his time and set Stuart up. The penalty that he won at Leeds, yes, it got overturned, but again has come on and had an impact. And then Saturday in a really, really strong performance. So I'm sure Ralph would be very pleased with the way he played. And he looked confident. He didn't look intimidated, which is great. And he looked at home in the team. And he looked like he played a lot more games than he had so far. So, yeah, really, really good performance. Definitely.
Now, Danny Ings being out for a few weeks, Paul, is undoubtedly a blow. Is this now an opportunity for Che Adams to get more of a run in the team? And if he does, how important do you think that will be for him?
Oh, hugely important. Yeah, I think he was unlucky, really, to lose his place in the team when he did. He had been on a barren streak. Lovely comment from the manager this week in his press conference, saying that he hopes it'll be the ketchup bottle phenomenon that for Che this week, where you wait for ages for the ketchup to come out and then you get a huge explosion all at once. So it was a wonderful goal, wasn't it, against Sheffield United, and just a wonderful all-round display, because he came on as an early sub. He could well have sulked. He could have had his shoulders slumped when he lost his place in the team a few weeks ago, when he only came on then against the team at the bottom of the table because of an injury. There's been no sign of that at all. And right from the off, he caused so many problems for the Sheffield United backline, with his energy, his tenacity, his movement, his power. And I just think that he is someone who clearly has complete faith and trust in the manager. That trust and faith is coming back the other way as well. The manager really likes him. I think they could have done worse than just keep showing him videos of his amazing goal against City at St Mary's back in the summer, because that completely transformed him. And going up against those players again here this evening, it's surely got to bring back good memories. Either side of the summer, I think he was involved directly in 11 goals in 14 games, something like that. He looked a completely different player to the one that had struggled in his first few months in the Premier League. And he's still young. He's still only in his second Premier League season. This is his first as an established Premier League player, or maybe he's even still on that journey. So there's an awful lot to come from him. But I love his temperament. I love his work ethic. He's clearly not going into dark places, really struggling with himself when he does have a little bit of a difficult run of form. And I don't expect City's backline to relish the challenge that he'll give them in this game this evening. And previously we've seen Danny Ings be out, and Che Adams has led the line with great maturity and great effectiveness. So yes, of course, it's a huge blow to lose Danny, but Che scoring that goal against Sheffield United, to give him a real boost and belief and confidence and all the rest of it, I think that's very aptly timed.
Yeah, most definitely. Well, let's hear it from Ralph now, shall we? He was asked in his press conference about the changes he plans to make to the side this evening.
How much, you talked about risk and reward there, how much can you risk with players that have just come back from injury? Because your matches after this game are Brighton, Bournemouth, Burnley, West Brom and Palace. You could say, well, we just need to get through Wednesday and make sure players are fit for the 5 games afterwards, which are huge matches for us. I mean, can you take that attitude, or do you have to put your strongest team out and compete with Man City all the time?
I think it's normal that in such moments, every team likes to rotate. We have seen that rotation for us is a little bit more difficult. On some positions, it's possible. On others, maybe not so good. But even then, you have to think about it. And yeah, that's the reason why we have to select very carefully what we do on Wednesday. We will still sure have a few changes, I think, but we have to be careful that we still have a strong side there.
So Ralph's saying there that he's going to make some changes, Dean, but in some positions it's not really possible. I mean, if you take right back, for example, we've seen Kyle Walker-Peters come back from injury and then immediately get injured again with no kind of real right back to replace him.
Yeah, it's a difficult situation at the moment. One, because Kyle Walker-Peters has been so good this season in his performances and become such an important player. And I think it's been evident when he hasn't played that the position of the fullbacks is so important in the way Southampton play from an attacking point of view, because they give the team such width. So to have Kyle playing and with his athletic ability, with his direct approach, with his his willingness to get forward is really important. The manager has tried different players in that position. He's tried to play centre halves in Bednarek and Stevens. He's tried to play James Ward-Prowse there, and it hasn't quite worked out and hasn't quite been as effective. So I think it's something that the manager would like to change in the summer. Would he like to bring in an additional player in to give competition for that position? But it's so important. I've mentioned with the shape that the Southampton play, to have Kyle Walker-Peters playing at right back, he's brilliant. He really is. He's almost like a winger because he's so fit, because he's so strong. So when he has had an injury or when he's been missing from the team, it's really affected the way Southampton can play and affected them in winning games. So I'm sure it is a headache for the manager, and he'll want to play Kyle Walker-Peters as much as he can. But I think we have to remember it's his first probably full season in professional first team football. The amount of games that they're playing in a short period of time in this kind of unique season has probably affected him a little bit more. So in a normal season, I think he will be okay. But no, he's been brilliant all season.
Yeah, he really has. Now, Belvers, it's unsurprising to hear that Manchester City have scored the most goals of any other team in the Premier League this season, 56 to be precise. Is it a good idea to shake up the defence, given just how lethal this opponent is tonight?
Oh, I'd be very reluctant to do that unless the stats from the medical team are showing there's one or two in the red zone, their phrase for if players look like an injury is on the horizon. We've seen that back four of Walker-Peters, Bednarek, Vestergaard and Bertrand be so effective. They have a wonderful understanding, a terrific record together. It was no surprise for me to see them keep a clean sheet as soon as they were back together at the weekend. The first time they played a full 90 minutes together since City came to St Mary's. Saying that though, Mohamed Salisu was very good when he came into the team after his well-publicised injury problems. He had a run of 5 or 6 games in a month or so. And yeah, very, very impressive. He looks a real talent, particularly for the future, but also someone who can come in and do a job now. And it's very easy to forget the job that Jack Stevens has done this season as well. Dean mentioned him earlier on. I looked it up because of that, and he helped Southampton keep 6 clean sheets in his 15 appearances, and he's quite versatile as well, so can help out all along the back line. But I think because, as we said earlier, Ralph will be believing Southampton can get a result up at the Etihad, so he will be looking to put his best team out there. Now, he will have a lot of ideas in his head as to the best way to get that result, but I would be surprised if that doesn't involve the same back four, back five that we saw at the weekend.
Well, just before we bring you the team news, let's have a look at what you're saying on socials. Thanks for getting in touch, Wendy. She says, come on, you Saints. And Andrew's got in touch as well. He says, good luck tonight. Steve's also left us a comment. He says, just shows 100% commitment tonight and score, and we'll take care of ourselves. Snowy Clan, come on, you mighty Saints, they say. And a final one for now from Stephen. Not expecting miracles, just want to see passion for the shirt. Well, here we go. Here is the team news now then. then, make of this what you will. We will be asking Dean and Belvers what they think of this Southampton starting 11. I suppose the obvious surprise there is that Alex McCarthy does start in goal. Let's run through the rest of the team then. Jack Stevens, Yannick Vestergaard, Ryan Bertrand, Mohamed Salisu and Ryan Bertrand. Our captain, James Ward-Prowse, Stuart Armstrong, Moussa Djenepo, Nathan Redmond and Shay Adams. The Saints substitutes are as follows: Fraser Forster, Kane Ramsey, Carl Walker-Peters, Ibrahima Diallo, Will Ferry, Caleb Watts, Nathan Tella, Takumi Minamino and Dan and Lindeloo. Wow, a few surprises in there. Dee, let's come to you first. I'm not quite sure where to start with this one. What's striking you as the biggest surprise there? Because you were quite sure that Carl Walker-Peters would remain in that starting 11, and actually we've gone for a completely different backline here.
Yeah, I got it completely wrong, Kenzie. So, look, I think I've just looked at the team there. I've just kind of probably worked out what potentially could happen. I think I've been wrong before, but I think the manager's going to change the shape, personally. I think he'll go to 3 centre-halves with 2 wing-backs and potentially Jack Stevens sitting in front of the back 3 as well. So almost like a diamond, where you'll get the 3 centre-halves and then Jack Stevens protecting the back 3 as well. I think Djenepo will play as a right wing-back, Ryan Bertrand as a left wing-back. And then you'll have James Ward-Prowse and Armstrong just in front of Jack Stevens, and Nathan Redmond and Shay Adams up front. So a lot of changes. Nice to see McCarthy come back into the team, because he's been an important player this season. And it looks strong. I think the manager's gone for a strong foundation to maybe look to contain Man City and look to keep a clean sheet if possible. And then you've got the pace and the willingness of Nathan Redmond on the break and Shay Adams on the break. But it's going to be difficult against Manchester City. But there's an effective team there. But obviously, I'm guessing at the shape. I could be completely wrong. But that looks like the most natural choice with the amount of defenders within the starting 11.
Yeah, Belvers, we are obviously guessing, but it does look likely that there will be a change in formation. You said you'd be a little bit reluctant to shake things up. How do you feel about that starting 11?
I make that 6 changes from the side that played Sheffield United, and this is exactly what I predicted just a couple of minutes ago. I'm going to go against Mr. Dean Hammond, which I am even more reluctant to do. I think we might be seeing still a 4-2-2-2 with Jan Bednarek playing right back, as he has done with Carl Walker-Peters injured, and Jack Stevens being pushed into midfield alongside James Ward-Prowse. Now, that's not something he tried before when he had those issues with Oriol Romeu's previous injury and Ibrahima Diallo being out, but I do wonder if that's what we're going to have. And then Armstrong, Djenepo as the 2 wide number 10s, as the manager calls them, Redmond and Adams up front. I mean, it strikes me as a risk. I remember on the last trip to Manchester a couple of weeks ago, we were pleased that there were no more sort of square pegs in round holes, and then obviously that all went completely wrong just 2 minutes into the game. This does strike me as either change in formation, which is something the manager has seemed very reluctant to do since way back early on in his first full season, or it involves a couple of players out of position. So yes, very, very strong in terms of the players that are playing. Intrigued to see how they're going to line up, and I think it's brave and fascinating.
Yeah, it'll be very interesting to see. Dean, 2 players who were on the bench against Sheffield United were Moussa Djenepo and Nathan Redmond. They're both starting tonight. Do you think they've got something to prove to Ralph now?
I think it's a good question, Steve. I think potentially yes. I think they've got something to prove to themselves as well. I think both of them are exceptional players. Djenepo is still young. I think Djenepo is 22 years old. And if you look at his performances this season, defensively, he's improved a lot. His discipline's improved a lot. But I think we would all love to see the magic that he's got in the top half of the field. His end product. For instance, the goal he scored against Sheffield United last season, the goal he scored against Brighton last season, They're the sort of moments you'd love to see from Djenepo on a more consistent basis. But it also depends on what the manager's asking him to do. The manager might be very, very happy with him because of the way he's performing in terms of his defensive duties. Maybe he's trying to make him into a different player to then be able to express his natural ability and his natural talent. And Nathan Redmond, I think he's a player that he breathes off confidence. He breathes off that self-belief, and he looks a little bit frustrated potentially from maybe being in and out of the team. He's had a few injuries. His form's been up and down, a change of position, playing up front or playing wide. So he's not quite had that consistency. But also, I think Nathan's 27, 26. So he's coming into the prime of his career. So, he can still be a really effective player for Southampton. But yes, I think there's probably, if you're judging it on this season, I think there's some question marks over whether the manager wants to play them regularly. But in terms of their ability and the way they can impact a game, I think they're fantastic for the squad, and especially Nathan coming off the bench when defenders are tired, you wouldn't want to play against him because he carries the ball so well. He's very attacking. His goal against Sheffield United earlier in this season was brilliant. Was him at his best, playing a 1-2, running in behind, and a really good finish. So I think maybe they've got more to prove to themselves than the manager.
Yeah, well, I'm sure we're all excited to see how they perform tonight. But right now, we're going to talk about Ralph Hasenhüttl because he has now managed 100 games in charge of Southampton. So we'll chat a bit about that now. Paul, what did you make of his appointment at the time when he took over?
I remember the build up to it very much. The first time I, heard the whisper that he might be the man, immediately had to look him up. I'd never heard of him before. I don't know anything about German football. I admit that, but the way he performed with Leipzig seemed exciting potentially. The signing, the day he was appointed, it was kind of almost a bit low key because it was the day of a game against Spurs at Wembley, and I was at that game, and attempts to speak to the new manager before and indeed afterwards were thwarted, as he was there just an observer. He said he didn't want to get involved, he didn't want to say anything. But then the press conference, which I think was just the next day, we were all charmed. I remember being very impressed from my usual seat when we were allowed in at press conferences, front row to the left. He outlined a very exciting philosophy and plan for the club, and gave some really positive messages to the fans and to the players as well in that press conference, without ever resorting to cliche. I vividly remember him talking about how proud the city would be of the football that his team would play in his time at Southampton, that they would always, whether the team won, lost or draw, he was confident that the supporters would go away really pleased with the passion and energy and work that they'd seen from the team on the pitch. There were some wonderful little sound bites as well when he was asked about, are you definitely the man to get them out of the relegation battle and things? He said, there's no guarantee in football. If you want a guarantee, buy a washing machine. He perfectly happy to talk about what his name meant in German, a small hutch for rabbits. Can you imagine Jose talking about what Mourinho meant if it was something like that in Portuguese? He was just he came across as such a genuinely nice guy who was really enthusiastic about his football. He had a clear plan as well. Right back then, he said about the 4-2-2-2 formation, and it's been very, very clear since that even though it's not been plain sailing by any means, there is a genuinely strong bond between him and the fans in both directions. And that hasn't always been the case in recent years with his predecessors. There's often been a much stronger warmth from supporters to the manager than coming back the other way. That's not the case here. Ralph loves this club, loves the support base. They love him too. And very, very hopeful that this is a relationship that lasts a long time into the future as well.
Yeah, without a doubt, Belvers. And looking at that footage we saw just a moment ago, he clearly has so much passion, doesn't he? Dean, what would you say his top qualities are as a manager?
I love his honesty. I love his emotion. Paul just mentioned the connection with the fans. I think that's brilliant. You just mentioned, his reaction when he wins games. We've seen tears before. I think that's fantastic. I love the way he speaks with conviction. He's got authority in terms of his job and the way he conducts himself with the players. His playing style is unique, which is great. It's exciting to watch. It's on the front foot. It's proactive, which I love. He gets you off your seat when you watch Southampton play. He tries to win games. I think that's really, really good to watch. And the team spirit and the connection he seems to have with the players. And that comes from the results when they've won, but also the reaction when they've had poor results. We'll go back to the result against Leicester, the result against Manchester United. To the club to then react and the players react shows that there's a real strong relationship. So, I think his qualities as a manager and as a man are brilliant. And the one thing you can never ask more for as a player is a manager being honest with you. And the players have a clear understanding of what the manager wants. And that's really important. And I think that comes from the hard work they do on the training ground. The manager has mentioned that many, many times, that he wants the players to work really hard so they're fit and strong. So he's been great. His tactics are great. They're exciting to watch. Like anyone, we could all question certain things when results don't go away. But I think he's done a great job. He really has. And, he fits the model perfectly for Southampton, developing younger players, winning football matches and working under restrictions as well. He's not had a lot of money to spend. But, during this season, we've been top of the league. We've been in the top 4 and we've beaten some good teams. So I agree with Paul. He's been brilliant and long may it continue.
Well, to mark Ralph's century of games at the helm, we have picked his top 5 matches in charge of Southampton. And we're going to start with Saints' 2-1 victory over Tottenham in the 18-19 season. Now, Spurs would go on to reach the Champions League final that year. So, Paul, how much of an accomplishment was it to beat them that day, especially going behind?
Yeah, very big accomplishment. I have very different memories of this to most of our viewers watching because, Kenzie already outed me on the opening day of the season. I'm from Hertfordshire. I grew up a Spurs fan, only 10, 15 minutes from the ground, family all Spurs fans. And this remains the only game that my son has been to in his life. He just turned 6, I think, back then. I was trying to convince him to be a Spurs fan as well, even though we now only live sort of 10, 15 minutes from St Mary's. And he was very excited when Harry Kane scored, but far more excited by the ice cream he had before kickoff and the jumbo hot dog that I bought him at half time. Now, because he was only 6, his attention span sort of wavered a little bit around the 70-minute mark. So we left early at 1-0. Now, as far as I'm concerned, Spurs won this game 1-0 because I didn't see anything else. So should we just leave it there?
I'm afraid we can't do that, Balvers.
It was a tremendous comeback. I think, Harry Kane, at half time, it looked very much like Spurs were totally in command. I remember the player that changed the game was Josh Sims. And this was one of the first glimpses we saw of how trusting Ralph is in his young players, because Jan Valery scored the equaliser, as we can see, his second in 2 games, not as spectacular as the one the previous week against United, but more important, arguably. And then James Ward-Prowse, the free kick is just extraordinary. We've seen so many since then. This, until recently, certainly was his favourite that he'd scored. It might have just been overtaken by the one against Newcastle. Me and Leo, my boy, heard the roar of the equaliser when we were only in the concourse. That's how close we were to seeing it. But this was a huge win because it was the first from behind under Ralph Hasenhüttl. It took the team up to 16th. If they'd lost, if it stayed 1-0, they'd have been in the bottom 3. Of course, went on from here to escape relegation that season and climb up the table. And of course, it was a first win against one of the big clubs, because of course Ralph's first win was against Arsenal, but we don't consider them a big club.
Babs, I've got to ask, who did Leo pick? Is he a Saints fan or a Spurs fan?
If I'm perfectly honest, he is still wavering. He's not been completely bitten by the football bug. What he does what he's absolutely convinced about is telling me how rubbish Spurs are is the funniest game in the world. So that game is played most days.
Leo sounds like a smart
Brilliant.
lad. He looked like he enjoyed that match as well. Great to see that, Belvis. Thanks for that. Let's talk about the next match then. This was a big one, happened earlier on in the year. Southampton beating Premier League champions Liverpool 1-0. We mentioned seeing Ralph in tears. This was the game that reduced him to those tears. Dean, do you think that the gloss may have been slightly taken off of that win, given just how poor Liverpool's form has been since that win?
No, I don't think so, because at the time Liverpool were playing particularly well. I think a couple of games before they'd just gone to Crystal Palace and won 7-0. So, you know, they were a top team. They were champions. I don't think they were having the problems at the time they are now. We can see from this, obviously, the free kick and the start Southampton had was brilliant. The awareness of James Ward-Prowse and the movement of Danny Ings, and then the finish is so natural to him, scoring against his former team. You know, showing some respect there, not really celebrating, but an unbelievable finish. And just a great result against a top team that, you know, had some world-class players playing on the evening. And Southampton were great. You know, the second half, especially, you know, they had to really dig deep. They gave up a lot of possession of the ball, held a really, really good shape, and didn't really give Liverpool too many opportunities, maybe half chances. Liverpool were getting into good areas of the pitch. Could have potentially had a penalty maybe against Mane when Kyle Walker-Peters fouled him. And you've seen here the reaction of Ralph. You know, that was just a brilliant moment. And I think at the time Southampton went up into the top. They were 5th in the league as well. So a really important result. And no, I don't think it takes off the gloss, because Liverpool, the problems having at the moment is well documented. But at the time, they were still a real force. And it was a great result for Southampton. And a brilliant win just because of the way they adapted to the performance. It wasn't the high pressing. It wasn't trying to score 2 or 3 goals. It was protecting a lead, and they did that very well.
Well, next up, we've picked Ralph's first home game in charge. In this one, Southampton hadn't won in 3.5 months, and Arsenal hadn't lost in 4 months, Paul. So to beat them 3-2, the form book was definitely thrown out of the window here.
It was, and it was such an amazing game. Almost basketball-like, one end to the other all the time, and a very shrewd move from Southampton before, and just to make sure that they really loved the manager from the off, he gave them free drinks vouchers, sent them out to all the season ticket holders. Saints were ahead 3 times in this game. Danny Ings getting the first, and then the equaliser, and then they went ahead again and equalised, because Arsenal were on a 22-match unbeaten run under Unai Emery. Southampton only had 9 points from 16 games before this one, but they did have a decent record at home against Arsenal. I think since promotion they'd met 6 times, only lost once. There was the famous 4-0 Cuco Martina inspired win in there as well. But you know, this was our first glimpse of the work ethic Saints were going to have and demonstrate under Ralph Hasenhüttl, the never say die attitude, the tenacity, the passion, the spirit, because they scored 3. They could have had more. It was a wonderful dramatic finish. What a lovely little chip from Shane Long for Charlie Austin to grab. And the celebrations afterwards, I remember those vividly. And I think there might even have been a glimpse of tears in Ralph's eyes, which of course we then saw in the Liverpool game we've just talked about, and Sheffield United at home as well when the fans came back. But Ralph said after that game, that's why he came to the Premier League, because the atmosphere in the stadium that day was sensational, phenomenal. He said he came to the Premier League, to English football, for that passion, that emotion and that atmosphere. And of course, we've seen it a fair few times since, even though there have been a fair few bumps in the road, but generally very much an upward curve since that first home game. And the relationship between fans and Ralph started off sensationally. It's carried on that way.
Yeah, it really has. Now, the next match we are going to recap is against tonight's opponents. We all remember this one from last season when we beat Manchester City at St Mary's 1-0. Was this result really testament, Dean, to the hard work the team had put in, and the boss, of course, throughout lockdown? Because we were on absolute fire at this point.
It was, Kenzie. You know, the team came back really, really fresh, really, really fit and caught a lot of teams by surprise by the organisation and the preparation and the fitness that they showed. And it just, it showed in this in terms of the pressing, but it was educated. It was pressing. They weren't just running everywhere. They were setting traps for Manchester City, and Shay's goal was fantastic. Probably my choice of the goal of the season, and his first goal for the club as well, which is really important. I remember the really, really good performances from Alex McCarthy and Jack Stevens actually in this game was very, very impressive. He made a lot of interceptions, a lot of blocks, read the game really, really well. And on a similar occasion to the Liverpool performance, got ahead early, Southampton, and protected the lead with great team spirit, really good discipline, and showed again that other side to their performance and grinding out a result when they didn't have a lot of possession of the ball against a really strong team. Had a little bit of luck as well, but really deserved the win and just showed how well they worked during that lockdown period as a team and how much work they'd done on the training ground. So full credit, and it was a brilliant win. It really was.
And finally, we couldn't not include this one because it felt like such a big moment in Ralph's tenure, and that was avenging the 9-0 defeat to Leicester by beating them 2-1 on their own turf. Paul, tell us about this one.
Well, it was easy, according to the manager. He said you'd never get an easier team talk than facing a team that's already put 9 past you earlier in the season. But I think his tongue must have been firmly in his cheek then. This was enormous. And we started this sequence with a come-from-behind win against Spurs. This was another one where they went behind first of all. And the spirit they showed, having coming up against a team that had humiliated them earlier on in the season at St Mary's, to fall a goal behind, but to battle back and to win, I think it exercised a lot of ghosts. But it more than anything, it showed that this was a very different animal to the one we'd seen earlier on that season. I think I've mentioned before that was a potentially embarrassing moment for Danny Ings there. He was on a terrific run. I think that was 10 goals in 10 starts in the Premier League. It was a wonderful season. But I remember him telling me that when he pulled the shirt over his head, something he'd never done before, there was a moment of panic because the shirt kind of got stuck on his head and he couldn't get it off. And friends of his have pointed that out to him many, many times since. So he says, you will never see that celebration again. But there were no doubts back then that 4-2-2-2 was the way to go. They were on a terrific run of form. There was a VAR call that went Saints' way, which, that's unusual, right at the death, because Leicester thought they'd equalised, which would have been heartbreaking. But to win that one 2-1, that really was momentous. After everything that had happened, after everything that had been said, so many clubs would have pulled the trigger after the 9-0. Saints do things differently. They stuck with Ralph. They backed him even more if they could do. The whole dressing room was clearly behind him, and everyone was vindicated with that result and what they went on to achieve since.
Yeah, absolutely. I was in the stands for that one and it really was an amazing atmosphere. Certainly made the journey home a lot easier. And I'm loving your optimism as always on social media. Plenty of you getting in touch, giving us your thoughts on this evening's match. James Hazard, hello to you. He says it's a free hit for us tonight. Just got to go there and frustrate them. Thanks for this one, Ryan. He says Manchester City may be a good team, but they are beatable. Hopefully Shay Adams gets another. Yeah, let's hope so. Tim Greenman, no team is unbeatable. We've got every chance of a win or a draw. Thanks for that one. Pete, hello to you. He says, in Ralph we trust, up the Saints. We can pull it off. Yeah, love that. Ryan said, good evening, Kenzie, Dean and Paul. Didn't fancy saying hello to you there, Steve.
Cheers for that.
He said he's looking forward to the game. Hopefully that was just an oversight on Ryan's part. James Price on YouTube, just the hashtag in Ralph we trust. Tom, good evening. He's watching all the way from Barcelona. Thank you for your company. He says, eyes on Southampton tonight. Come on, you Reds. And a final one here from Trish. She says, in Ralph we trust, and lots of love hearts.
Great stuff. Well, before we refocus on today's game, let's have a look back at when the two sides met earlier in the season.
Real belief around this city and around this club at the moment. It will be the left foot of De Silva, goes right across everyone. The offside flag goes up despite it being put into the back of the net by Rodri. who actually was left at the back post unmarked, but City have picked it up. They're quickest to the second ball, and De Bruyne's got free, pulls it back to Sterling. 1-0, unmarked, coming in off the left-hand side. It's been coming from Manchester City, and Raheem Sterling has the goal, his fourth of the campaign. Walcott on the right, into the penalty area, loops it for a free header, and Ings just missed it. May have been Adams actually at the near post. He missed the initial header, and De Bruyne gets it back, and he pulls it back. Should be 2-0. He's gone round 2, and then he's made an absolute mess of it, Bernardo Silva. The goal was gaping. He just had to place it past McCarthy. He managed to nick it past the oncoming player, and Saints on the counter, and that stretch only as far as Adams, who heads it out of play, stuttering backwards on his heels. It's a great cross from the right, and the City defender played it up into the air. Now Mahrez, fresh on the pitch, tries to cross, ricochets kind, comes back to Gundogan, and a good save from McCarthy, tips it over the bar for a corner. He's Sterling, the goal scorer of the first goal. He finds Bernardo Silva, chips it across and over the bar by Mahrez. 8 yards out, another let off, 1-0 still. That's it, 5 minutes of stoppage time gone. Ralph Hasenhüttl and Pep Guardiola, I think, say well played to each other.
Well, a 1-0 defeat for the Saints earlier this season, that would actually start Manchester City's 21-game winning streak. Belvis just lost by a narrow margin, though. Will that give the Saints confidence going into the game this evening?
Yes, a little bit. I think it was a day when they started above City. Lost Danny Ings early again, which was a huge shame. But you know, the first big impact by Nathan Tella, which was a positive. And oddly, even though they lost this game, it was arguably a far better performance than the one that they won 1-0, which was mainly an exercise in real bullish defending. They played with great energy as ever, and they really caused City a lot of problems that day with their pressing game. I think it's very rare that Pep Guardiola's sides are put under such relentless pressure as they were, particularly in the first half. They will take heart, I think, from that performance, and the fact that they led at the Etihad last season 1-0 before Kyle Walker grabbed the winner very, very late on, I think. And I'm pretty sure City had to wait until the 70th minute to have their first shot on target in that game, which is extraordinary when you consider that only 8 days earlier there'd been the 9-0 against Leicester. Look, all of these games are in the past, but equally Saints have beaten all of the big six in just the last 15 months. So while they perhaps aren't directly using memories and clips from these games to boost their confidence, there's no doubt that there's no one in that dressing room, in the squad, behind the scenes at Saints who won't be believing today that they can go to the Etihad and come away with all 3 points, because they've beaten all the big teams before. They've performed very well against all of the big teams, home and away. So while City have been on an amazing run of form and results recently, I don't think this would count as a huge Premier League shock if Southampton nicked a win today.
Yeah, well, while that match started their 21-game winning streak, it came to an end on Sunday, Dean. So do you think this is now a good or a bad time to be playing them?
I don't think it's ever a good time to play Man City, to be honest. You know, they're probably the best team in Europe on current form. The run they went on was exceptional. It really, really was. And the results and the performances were brilliant. So it's going to be tough, but, you know, Man City have made changes. So it's not their so-called strongest team. It's not been the consistent team that have been winning them games. So that's a help. I think it's just more to the fact of Southampton's performance. They're going to need to frustrate Manchester City. They're going to need to be patient. You have to start well as well. You have to stay within the game. I think if you go a goal down or 2 goal down early, it's very, very difficult. But like Paul said, you know, the performances against Manchester City over the past couple of seasons have been very, very good, with some good results as well. So they will get opportunities. The opportunities will be limited for Southampton, like any team playing against Manchester City. So it'll be down to taking them opportunities and defending really well, showing that discipline and that dedication in defending as a team, not just the back 4, 5, whatever shape we're playing today. And just staying in the game. If they do go 1-0 down, it's reacting well to that disappointment. But if Man City play at their best, then it's going to be tough, because they are such a brilliant team. But I'm sure Southampton can get something out of this game if they go in with that confidence and that disciplined shape.
Yeah, most definitely. Now, Belvis, Pep Guardiola held James Ward-Prowse the best free kick taker he'd ever seen in his life back in December. Are you going to argue with Pep on that one?
No, that's not a bad recommendation or bit of praise, is it? When you consider that he's working right now with Kevin De Bruyne, he's worked in the past with Ronaldinho, Lionel Messi, of course. So I know James Ward-Prowse himself took a fair bit of credit from that. He said, sort of inspired him to carry on working as hard and look to improve. And yeah, since that day, he has. A couple of his free kicks since then have been absolutely spectacular. And Pep Guardiola is clearly not alone, because I think I read recently that in FIFA 21, he's got the highest accuracy rating from set pieces in the Premier League, and they know what they're doing as well. And the way he just so consistently grazes the paint off the post and bar from these free kicks is just incredible. He gives goalkeepers so little opportunity to keep out these free kicks, and defences all over the country. I'm sure managers, the last thing they do before leaving the dressing room, before facing a Southampton team, they remind their players, do not give away free kicks in our own half. I was going to say in the final third, even if they're a bit deeper, he can still be absolutely lethal delivering the ball for his teammates. So, he is a huge threat. He's already equalled or set records in the Premier League for the number of direct free kicks he's scoring. The all-time top 5 or something is within his reach. He's only a couple short of the likes of Henry and Zola and Laurent Robert and things, even though David Beckham's a little bit further out from there. So no, I'm certainly not going to disagree with Pep over this. What I'm most pleased about with this, though, is that he's got better at his free kicks and set pieces, which used to be pretty much his only attribute, his only standout attribute. But now he is such a complete midfielder. He's added so much aggression and tenacity and intensity to that role right in the middle of the park, which is so crucial to Ralph Hasenhüttl's system. Whereas in the past, he was always praised as a very good technical player with the set pieces on board, but managers weren't really sure how to fit him in to their teams, and he was very much in and out. Now he is the first name on the team sheet. He's the captain. He is wonderfully dangerous anywhere in the opposition's half, and crucial at the back and in the middle of the park as well. So yeah, fantastic player, James Ward-Prowse.
Well, on the subject of set pieces, Dean, how important are they going to be in a game like this? You said chances are going to be limited, and I can imagine scoring against this City side from open play is going to be tough.
Yeah, I think if you look at the team selection, it may be something that the managers looked at as well. We've just mentioned James Ward-Prowse's delivery, and the size of the team now with the 5 centre halves on the pitch. They're going to be a bigger presence than Manchester City. They're going to be a bigger size. So if they can get the timing of their runs correct, if they can get their movement correct, James Ward-Prowse will put it into an area and there will be balls to attack. So it could be really important, Steve. And, if Shea Adams and Nathan Redmond can draw free kicks by holding the ball up or running with the ball when they do break on the counter-attack, I think that could be really, really important. And like Paul says, Pep will be fully aware of James's ability when he gets in positions to shoot. So he'll be instructing his defenders not to give free kicks away and not to be too aggressive. So yeah, if they do get them opportunities, I'd fancy the centre halves getting the first contact in the box. I really would, especially Vestergaard. I think he could do a little bit better from attacking set pieces because he's such a good size. He really is, and he's good in the air as well. So he could be really important tonight.
Well, let's get some score predictions from you then, shall we? Belvis, will come to you first. The only fixture in the Premier League this evening. How do you see this one going?
I just said I wouldn't disagree with Pep, but he did have that wonderfully sarcastic response in his press conference yesterday, suggesting it could be 18-0 today. So I will disagree with that. I think I'm going to take on board what Dean just said about how one of the centre-backs could well score for Saints tonight, and I'm backing Shea Adams as well. And I think, the City lineup is interesting as well. They've left out Sterling, Jesus, they've left out Aguero, they've left out a lot of big players. So I think they've got threats all over the pitch. So I think a 2-2 draw for me.
Okay, like that one. Dean, what about you? What's your score prediction?
Yeah, I agree with Paul. It's the changes to the Man City team may just weaken them a little bit, not much, but I think a little bit. And Southampton, if they can be disciplined in their defending and stay within the game, I think they'll get a couple of chances, particularly from set pieces. And I'm going to go for a 1-1 tonight, a 1-1 draw.
Great stuff. Well, it's the team who won their first in 10 last time out against a side who lost their first in 21 as Manchester City host Southampton. Will Pep's citizens crumble again as Ralph's Saints march on the Etihad? Join us after the game on the final whistle, where we'll have all the post-match reaction and analysis with Dean, Paul, Kenzie and myself, Ryan. Enjoy the game and we'll see you then.